This podcast is featured on the Gun Rights Radio Network. Podcasting freedom. You can hear Gun Rights Radio Network on Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher allows you to listen to your favorite shows directly from your iPhone, Android phone, BlackBerry, or Palm phones, on demand and on the go. Don't have Stitcher? Download it for free today at Stitcher.com or in the app stores. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Gun Rights Radio Network shows can be found under sources.
It's time for On Target Radio, Chicagoland's only radio show dedicated to educating, entertaining, and discussion of firearms, legislation, and your Second Amendment rights. Presented in part by the Illinois State Rifle Association, Illinois Gun Works, Pelcher's Shooting Supply, and Safer USA. Now here's your host, firearm instructor, educator, and enthusiastic Second Amendment proponent, David Lombardo.
And welcome to On Target Radio, America's voice for the Second Amendment. That was a good start.
Yeah, that was a good start.
Yeah, there you go. I'm David Lombardo, and my co-host Tim Dalan across the council for me. Say hi, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
There we go. That was an exciting moment in radio journalism. Every Sunday, we'll be right here from 9 to 10 p.m. talking about all things Second Amendment, and it's your opportunity to call in and talk to our guests. This evening is going to be very interesting. We'll take your questions and comments at 312-642-5600, or go to our Facebook, like our page On Target Radio, and ask a question there. But first, we have David's rant for the week.
Yes.
This one is liberalism, a mental disorder.
Pretty much.
It is. I have a good friend who believes liberalism is a mental disorder. I've always laughed when he said it, but lately I've come to realize he's right, and I'll give you proof. Stories that I've read recently that have been reported in USA Today, hardly a house organ for the conservative movement, I would add, include two 6-year-old Maryland students who were suspended for using their fingers as imaginary guns. Then there was the 7-year-old Baltimore boy who was suspended from school for nibbling a Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun. And you thought they were full of beans when they said sugar kills. In Pennsylvania, a 5-year-old was suspended from kindergarten for wielding a Hello Kitty toy gun that makes soap bubbles. She was suspended for, and I kid you not, making terroristic threats with a bubble gun. Can anyone explain to me how a kindergarten with a bubble gun equates to a terrorist? The point is, it does to liberals. Recently, I agreed to have a discussion about gun control on a liberal blog. What was I thinking? I must have had one too many Pop-Tarts myself that day. Anyway, I didn't expect most of them to have a particularly good grasp of firearms, but I was actually shocked at what I found. There was no attempt at intelligent discussion. They would extract a sentence I'd written, take it completely out of context, and publish such things as I wanted to kill police officers, I wanted to overthrow the government, and I don't care how many children get killed. I'm not sure if even a quick 220 volts to the brain would purge those demons. 2 weeks ago, I watched the entire 8-hour debacle of the Illinois House debating concealed carry. If anybody has any doubt whatsoever about liberalism being a mental disease, go watch that 8 hours. I just kept mumbling, we're paying them for this? What struck me most was the farcical discussion of each individual amendment. With few exceptions, the liberal sponsor of any given amendment was unable to explain the amendment at all when questioned. And when they did try to answer a question, they had no understanding of the subject of their own amendment. In what has to be the most ironic amendment with unintended consequences, is proposed concealed carry not be allowed on public transportation. Individuals carrying a concealed weapon would have to stop at the L platform, take out their gun, unload it, put it in a box, then board the train. They would then reverse the process at their destination. It effectively creates the country's first gun-saturated zones. With 20 or 30 people fiddling with firearms on every L platform, it'll make public transportation terminals the safest places in the city. People will probably start having weddings, birthday parties, and picnics on L platforms. When a pro-gun amendment finally came up, the liberals badgered the sponsor with questions that, for the most part, were irrelevant, or worse, had no bearing on the subject. They couldn't wrap their brains around the meaning of the most basic concepts. How can anyone come to any conclusion other than liberals really do have a mental disorder? The only thing that liberals really care about is being reelected, which is increasingly followed by being incarcerated. So there's a great idea for combating liberalism here in Illinois, and this is it. Liberals are feeling secure with a majority in both houses, so let's shake up their world. I'm asking each of you to download half a dozen FOID card applications and talk your friends into applying for a FOID card. Let's spread the idea on Facebook and other forms of social media. Can you imagine the core meltdown the liberals will have if the number of FOID card applications quadruples over the next couple of months, particularly if they're in liberal stronghold Cook County? It's time to stand up and be counted. Literally. Let's show liberals there are plenty of gun owners in Illinois, and we vote. And that, Tim, is my rant of the week.
I agree with every word of it.
I think it's a good idea.
Bring on the black SUVs.
Several are parked out in front of my house 24 hours a day, actually.
Come on, Rom, buddy. Let's go.
There we go. So here's a big question. Big question for the evening is this microphone. That was withering microphone. You see, it's just kind of... If you're watching this on television, you'll know why we're having an interesting evening already. Here's the big question for the evening. Would you surrender your firearms in compliance with a law that violated your Second and Fifth Amendment rights? Call us at 312-642-5600 and voice your opinion. This evening, the subject is gun control and civil disobedience. Our guests are Ed Ronkowski and Walter Maksym, who both are attorneys and practice in the Chicagoland area. Later on during the show, we'll have Richard Pearson, the ISRA's executive director, call in, and he'll tell us what's going on in Springfield in terms of concealed carry and the laws that Madigan have been wanting to pass banning firearms. Ed, Walter, thank you very much for being here.
Well, thanks for having us.
My pleasure.
Let's start out with just a couple definitions, if we could. What is sedition and what is civil disobedience?
Well, I think generally the distinction is that, obviously it depends on who's calling the definition, but sedition would be a law, so you'd be in effect violating a law that most people in the society agree is a just and fair law, or you're to undermine the government that is enforcing the law. Whereas civil disobedience, there's at least an arguable point of view that's being expressed that the law is unjust and shouldn't be followed for one reason or another. In your situation, the situation you're talking about tonight, we're talking here not so much about the morality of a law, but the constitutionality of the law. So if someone were to say the law is not constitutional, you couldn't say that they're against their government, they're seditious, but they certainly are involved in a civil disobedient act, because if such a law is on the books and conflicts with the Constitution, one has to make a choice.
So you're saying, Walter, that say the majority of one of the entities, the House, the Senate, whatever, voted to ban something and confiscate a certain firearm. If, say, the majority did vote to do that, even if the minority was 49%, that said, no, this is unconstitutional, then that would carry through, that would be civil disobedience, because 49% of the...
Well, it's not a percentage thing, because...
I'm just saying a good chunk of them say this is unconstitutional.
Yeah, well, it goes a little broader, because you can't just go, it's not a popularity contest. It's also a question of taking a look at the intellectual framework for it, the history of it.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is, how would somebody make the determination that it was civil disobedience? You know, when you said somebody says there's a differing opinion, this might be in violation of the Second Amendment. Where do we see that? How do we?
Okay, keep in mind that the Heller decision said in 4 different places that the Second Amendment protects the ownership of firearms, quote, in common use at the times. If a firearm is in common use at the times, it's unconstitutional to ban it. Now, we're seeing Illinois and Colorado and New York wanting to ban high-capacity magazines, and they want to ban AR-15 type of weapons. These are weapons that are clearly in common use at the time. There's over 8 million AKs and AR-15 type semi-automatic rifles in the United States. Most gun dealers sell these type of firearms. 1 out of 5 rifles that are sold is an AR-style rifle. And statistically, first-time buyers of rifles are most likely to purchase an AR-style rifle. These are common-use weapons, and they can't be banned constitutionally.
You're listening to AM 560, The Answer. This is On Target Radio. We're talking about gun control and civil disobedience. The question is, we have about a minute. The question is this. people who really do want to see guns get banned are always saying, well, it's a duly elected Congress. They make the laws. You just have to live with it. But the issue is not whether or not the Congress passes a law. The question is whether or not it's constitutional.
Right.
No?
The doctrine of hierarchy of laws governs. In other words, we have a constitution that is the supreme law of the land, and anything that is adopted, whether or not the Congress likes it or not, that has to comport with those parameters. So the legislature can't do willy-nilly anything it pleases. It's confined, and that's the reason you have a checks and balances of a court system to test and see, does this or does this not, this law fall within the confines of the Constitution.
Okay, we have Michael on the phone. Michael, you have literally 15 seconds. You want to make a comment?
Yeah, I'll make the comment. Somebody told me that in the Obamacare there was something about a high capacity or weapons like the AR-15. Do you know anything about that?
Thanks, Michael. No, we don't.
There is no such provision in Obamacare.
Not that I'm aware of. I have not read all 3 billion pages of it, but I haven't heard that at all. So have you, Tim?
No, I haven't. Thanks, Michael, though, for a good question.
Appreciate it. And we're going to be back after these messages with more On Target Radio. You're listening to AM 560, The Answer.
For over 100 years, the Illinois State Rifle Association has supported the rights and freedoms of Illinois citizens to keep and bear arms. For over 100 years, the ISRA has supported the use of firearms as a sport for personal protection and as a fundamental aspect of national defense. For over 100 years, the Illinois State Rifle Association has been supporting you. Don't you think it's time you supported them? ISRA.org or 815-635-3198. The Illinois State Rifle Association, supporting you.
For 35 years, Pelcher's Shooters Supply has served the Lansing area. Pelcher's offers new and used firearms sales, appraisals, and gunsmithing service. Pelcher's new spacious showroom has hundreds of major brand firearms and supplies, and PelcherGuns.com features daily specials. Pelcher's Shooter Supply on the corner of Ridge Road and Henry Street in downtown Lansing. Online at PelcherGuns.com or call 708-474-0662.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer, with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
So, Gabby Giffords, right?
Yes.
Gabby Giffords' husband went out and bought an AR-15,
and
a 45, and he testified before a House subcommittee, right?
The day before. He bought the high-capacity magazines, too.
Where people should not be allowed to have that. And then he goes out and... See, that's liberals. That's a liberal concept. It's okay for me.
Right, but not for you.
No, but not for you. Well, this makes it
If we all became Democrats, does that mean we could have one?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Because,
You're listening to AM 560, The Answer. We are talking about gun control and civil disobedience this evening on Target Radio. Our guests are Ed Ronkowski and Walter Maksym, attorneys both. We were talking about civil disobedience when we went into the break. So let me just kind of get this in perspective. Does that... If we passively resist, is that illegal?
Yes. If there's a gun ban and it bans a weapon that you have and you're required to turn them in or you're a criminal and you don't, you are violating the law. The problem is it takes 2 to 10 years sometimes to test the constitutionality of a law. So what is a citizen supposed to do in that 2 to 10 year period before you could get a Supreme Court to rule on its constitutionality? Now, Fox News poll last January did a poll of whether people would obey a firearms ban. 70% of the Republicans said they wouldn't, and more than half the Democrats, self-identified Democrats, said they would not obey a firearms ban as it pertained to their weapons.
I hear people talk about, well, the police will go door to door. My experience has been the average street cop is not going to buy this at all.
First of all, let me correct you. It can happen here because it has happened here. Chicago had a handgun ban from 1982 until it was ruled unconstitutional in 2010. They had a Chicago Police Department gun task force that was active during most of that period of time. Every member of that task force was required to go out and get one gun per person per shift. At one time, what they were doing is the Chicago Police Department officers in the gun task force were accompanying ATF agents who were making records inspections at suburban gun shops. And they were looking over their shoulder and writing down the names of all Chicagoans who bought handguns after the gun ban went into effect and their addresses, and they were going to their houses and trying to seize the weapons. And that happened over a period of years. So it can happen. And they were successful in some cases. Occasionally, the citizen would say, no, I don't have that firearm. It's out of state. And if you come back here with a search warrant as you're threatening to rip the place up, what I'm going to do is remodel this whole place with my lawsuit in the 1983 action because the gun's not here. Now, if you want to go out and try to get a search warrant, go ahead. And some of the citizens stood up to it, and nothing happened to them. But a lot of them, surrendered their guns. But the mood of the population has changed, according to the polls they've had. The Canadian example is from 2001 to 2011. Canada had a gun registration program. The estimates were between 50 to 70% of the firearms that should have been registered weren't. The Canadians en masse were not registering their guns.
Just one thing I want to add. Under Heller and McDonald, it would appear that in certain circumstances you can go ahead and get preliminary relief. In other words, if there's a policy being enforced by a government and it's clearly unconstitutional, if you could go in and show, for example, a federal judge that this is just like strip searches in a prison, a policy that's being enforced, that you could probably stop that kind of practice based on the clear language of the Constitution and what Heller says, and that if the state proceeded or kept doing what they were doing, that they'd be all subject to 1983 civil rights violations and damages and so on. It would have absolutely it would be a sort of a mad move for government to go that step, and probably not successful. And it would be successful for the little citizen to go in and get some relief in court, I would think.
You're listening to On Target Radio, AM 560. The Answer. This is a subject of gun control and civil disobedience. And Tim is waving a flag at me, reminding me that it's his moment of glory here. I always forget this. I apologize.
You forget the most important part of the show.
You're right. I apologize. Go ahead. I get my rant. You get your nice thing. Go ahead.
This is Fighting Back, brought to you by the Illinois State Rifle Association. A Forestville, Maryland resident shot and injured a man who attempted to force his way into the man's apartment late Thursday night, police said. The man was under the influence of some sort of drugs when he went door to door, banging on the doors of multiple apartments in the 3300 block of Walters Lane. One resident opened the door with his firearm to investigate, and that's when the suspect forced his way inside. The resident took his gun, and as the two scuffled on the floor, he shot the intruder, the police said. After the shooting, the intruder fled and forced his way into yet another apartment nearby. After police did arrive, he was taken to a hospital for treatment and injuries and that were not considered life-threatening. The man's name has not been released because he has not yet been charged, but police said the resident's gun was legally owned and he would not be charged. This has been Fighting Back, brought to you by the Illinois State Rifle Association.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have no excuse.
You're bad.
You're
riding on the roof of the car on the way home.
It's my car. I just get excited by these topics. I get wrapped up. You're listening to On Target Radio, AM 560. The Answer. We're taking your calls at 312-642-5600 or go to our Facebook page, On Target Radio. Ask a question and we'll answer it. And while you're there, please friend us and recommend us to your friends. We keep talking about 1983, which is a Civil Rights Act. I think just in a paragraph, just explain the implication of that, because I don't think a lot of people even understand how that is a big part of this whole thing.
If a police officer comes and violates an individual's constitutional rights, and that could be proven in court, many times the individual will hire an attorney, file a civil rights lawsuit under the Section 1983, and the advantage of that is if and when the individual wins because his constitutional rights were violated, the court is supposed to award attorney's fees, which means that like the city of Chicago or whatever agency it is, has to pay the attorney's fees for you. And that's been done. In the McDonald case, they got over $500,000 to split among all the attorneys.
Woohoo! So Rahm Emanuel signed a check for $700 and some odd thousand. And if you want a copy, it's online.
And remember, residents of the city of Chicago,
to the
every
NRA.
time they come out with one of these bogus bills that they get sued over, you're paying the money.
That's what
that
people
didn't
don't
come out of
understand.
Rahm's pocket. That came out of your pocket.
Exactly.
One thing I want to comment. Walter was talking about getting relief in federal court if the laws are too onerous. The problem we're seeing lately is that the Illinois Attorney General and the city of Chicago, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office has taken the position that they don't have to obey the mandate in the federal court order that was just done in Madigan's case. And they've petitioned, I've read in the paper, the Illinois Supreme Court for a ruling of some sort that they don't have to follow this federal court order. And they're ignoring the supremacy clause of the Constitution. And it's like a civil disobedience on their behalf. And I don't know of any legal rationale that would allow them to ignore a federal court order where they were a party under the supremacy clause.
Well, and I don't remember who it was, but during the concealed carry debate, that very subject came up. Somebody stood up and said, "We don't have to. We're going to keep arresting him."
Well, right. If you're not a party, it does present an arguable position that we were not involved. We didn't have an opportunity to be heard. But if you're a party in the prior proceeding, you're pretty much stuck with that ruling in all circumstances. So I think it's a bad faith argument. But you have to understand they're getting their marching orders to fight this at every angle, and so they're going to come up with maybe a crummy argument, but they're going to come up with something to just hopefully keep their feet in the courthouse door.
Well, I agree, and it certainly can't be coincidental. At virtually every state in the union, the Democrats filed almost identical legislative moves to ban firearms in the state. It's just that's not coincidental. It's coming from on high. I can't imagine any other way that this could actually be happening. But we're going to be back to talk more about gun control and civil disobedience with Richard Pearson, the executive director of the Illinois State Rifle Association, will be on in our next segment, and we'll get an update on concealed carry and find out what Madigan is trying to do to us this week. All of that and more after these messages.
Attention firearm owners or those considering exercising your Second Amendment rights. I want to tell you about Illinois Gun Works. From void services and new firearm purchases to gunsmith services and an indoor shooting range, Don and his staff will assist you without attitude or pressure. Need training? Illinois Gun Works' popular Illinois Responsible Firearm Owners class teaches you the regulations to legally defend yourself, own, and transport your firearm. There's a required class for a Chicago firearm permit and popular new shooter familiarization class, including one for women. Now, I took this class and urge you to reserve your spot fast for this fun class. Illinois Gun Works offers a wide selection of training and certification classes, from security work to those just considering ownership, even special group classes. Illinois Gun Works, Chicagoland's full-service firearm headquarters, is located on Grand Avenue, just a block west of Harlem in Elmwood Park. Call 708-452-0040 or visit IllinoisGunWorks.com. That's 708-452-0040.
Hi, I'm David Lombardo, host of On Target Radio. You're living proof that radio advertising reaches listeners. In the 2 years I've been advertising on AM 560 WIND, Safer USA grew from 300 students a year to over 1,200. By coupling our On Target Radio broadcast with our Facebook page, we found our audience is steadily growing, and in only 2 months it appears we've exceeded 5,000 listeners. Over 34% are in the age group 25 to 34, 26% are 35 to 44. We have listeners from Rockford to Western Michigan and Southern Wisconsin to St. Louis. Thanks to live streaming on the internet, we also have listeners as far away as Germany, Japan, and New Zealand. On Target Radio is offering low-cost sponsorship opportunities on Chicago's premier conservative talk radio station. Advertising on AM 560 WIND has worked for Safer USA. Let me show you how it can work for you. Call 815-744-5487. Join the On Target Radio team today at 815-744-5487. 5487.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560. The Answer with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
Welcome back to On Target Radio, America's voice for the Second Amendment. We're just lining Richard Pearson up right now. We've got him on the line. We're lining up all the wires in the right direction. We'll have him on the line in just a second. We're talking about gun control and civil disobedience this evening, and we're taking your calls at 312-642-5600. Richard, how are you doing this evening?
All right. How are you?
I'm just fine. I want to thank you, before we get into business here, for giving me the opportunity to help out on iGold. I was really impressed by what went on down there. You guys did a great job.
Well, there's a lot of people that do a great job at iGold. I'm certainly not the only one. But the only way that you can preserve your rights in this climate is for everybody to get together, work together with a common goal. And that's one of the things that iGold does, is helps present that to the state legislature and the public in general.
Well, it was amazing seeing that many people lined up, parading down the street, going to the Capitol. I mean, what did you figure your final count was about?
Oh, probably about 8,200. I was hoping for more, but most people got cut off by the snow up north and that sort of thing, so that hurt us. I'm not sure how much, but I know it hurt us.
Yeah, there were 6 buses, which is at about 60 a bus. That's a pretty good percentage.
Yep, that'd be about another 300 people or something like that or more.
So we're talking about gun control and civil disobedience, and old friends of yours are on the air. Ed Ronkowski and Walter Maksym are with us. What's going on in Springfield in terms of a little bit about concealed carry, but I know Madigan had some assault weapon ban things going on. What's the status in Springfield?
Well, we have the usual lineup of the assault weapons ban. We have Eddie Acevedo and Senator Munoz, who are carrying the bills in the House and the Senate. And then, of course, we have the usual support staff with a couple of new ones they always show in there. We have Ann Williams, and we have, Senator Katowski and that sort of thing. So the same faces. This time they've kind of taken it apart and presented it sort of as a committee of the whole. And instead of doing a bill, they actually did a shell bill that's made up of a bunch of amendments.
That was 1155?
And 1156 and maybe 1157.
So just real quick on the concealed carry thing, June 9th is getting closer. Does it look like there's going to be something that is workable, or are we going to hit constitutional carry?
Well, I'm going to try to work for something, and we all are going to try to work for something that is workable. But you've got these people who are ideologues, and they would rather sink the ship than actually be reasonable. But in this case, if they sink the ship, hey, we have constitutional carry, and so it's going to be an interesting time. But but it's really better off for everyone if we go to a regular carry bill, so we have an understanding of what the parameters are. And, of course, what makes it so difficult is they want to make the parameters so tight that that it's almost useless to have a carry bill.
But at some point, it's self-defeating for the Dems to do that, because the Southern Democrats aren't going to buy a really flawed bill. And when you pair those with the Republicans, I don't think there's enough votes to pass a bad bill, is there?
There's probably not enough votes to pass a bad bill, but it's going to be difficult to pass a good bill also.
But then we go to constitutional carry. Right.
And then that will mean that it's going to be kind of a mess, because, you can get perhaps home rule communities. I'm not sure how home rule is going to play in this. This is a court order. So I'm not sure that home rule actually matters, but it might, and it'll have to be tested in the courts. But there'll be some people who pay some mighty high prices for that with their personally for that.
We've got about a minute left in the segment. Richard, are there going to be any firearms ban in the state of Illinois that you can reasonably predict?
Well, the answer is there could be. We're we're close. They're not there yet, but they're close. And so we have to constantly fight this stuff so we don't wind up with something like Colorado, which kind of surprises me. But Colorado doesn't have the Illinois State Rifle Association either. So
exactly.
And what can the average person do to help you with that, Richard? Do we call our elected officials? Do we send emails? Do we write letters? Or is the ISRA going to be focusing us on some certain people to?
Well, the answer is yes. I mean, we're going to be doing all those things. We're going to do everything that we can do. You have to always be ready to write an email, make a phone call. Particularly phone calls are effective because most people can do that very quickly. We're also probably going to do some other things that I'm not ready to announce yet, but we have to keep pressure on them. The other thing that's happening is it's very important that everyone gets a FOID card, an FOID card. If you're a spouse of a person who is a gun owner, you should have one.
We agree completely. In fact, that was in my rant of the evening, telling everybody to go out, get a FOID card. Let's try and quadruple the number over the next couple of months. So, Richard, thank you very much for calling in. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Richard.
Always look for your insight.
Good night, all.
Thank you very
Richard.
much. Bye-bye. We'll be back with more gun control and civil disobedience on Target Radio, AM 560, The Answer. I'm David Lombardo, president of Safer USA, Chicagoland's most popular firearm training school. We continue to offer our popular home protection and concealed carry seminar every month. This 8-hour seminar covers everything you need to know to safely and legally use a firearm for both concealed carry and home invasion, and qualifies you for Florida and Utah concealed carry permits good in about 30 states. Be sure to call and ask how we can help you raise funds for your organization or provide a guest speaker. We're also offering the NRA Basic Pistol Course and our Tactical Pistol 1 and 2. As always, I offer private one-on-one instruction for Basic Pistol, Chicago Firearm Certification, and Basic Home Defense. For further information, please call 877-954-3030 or go to saferusa.com. Safer USA, choosing to own a firearm is your business. Teaching you to own it responsibly is ours.
That's 877-954-3030 or saferusa.com.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer, with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
Welcome back to On Target Radio. We're talking about gun control and civil disobedience this evening. Our guests here in the studio are Ed Ronkowski and Walter Maksym, attorneys both. Joe has called in, and he has a comment about gun control and the Obamacare bill with veterans. That would be your cue, Joe.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, one of the things that they're doing with the Veterans Administration, my understanding is they'll ask veterans, do you have firearms in a home? And if they've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injury from their deployments overseas, under the Obamacare provision, from what I understand, physicians will report that, and then that will be one of the reasons they'll say you're mentally unstable or you're unable to own a firearm or legally possess a firearm because of these past diagnoses you had with post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injury. Even though you've been under treatment and you were cured and you were sent back to full duty within the military, it's irrelevant because of that. And doctors are being trained in the Veterans Administration to ask these questions. Are there firearms in a home? Is this happening? And this is one of the ways that even if there is civil disobedience, it's these legislators look at these laws and they will look at an option to basically say, hey, you cannot have a firearm because of this diagnosis.
Okay, Joe, we appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, thoughts on that?
I'll have one thought. If a doctor asked me those questions, I would ask him, what is your medical reason for asking that question? And if he didn't say he had a medical reason, he was doing it for political purposes, that's unethical for doctors to do that. And I would get a new doctor. I'd walk right out and say, I'm not paying the bill, you're unethical, and leave.
And by the way, state and the federal government are starting to slip that. are starting to slip that kind of provision in almost everything that's being passed nowadays that could affect your right to have a gun or use a gun.
And I've heard this a number of times. It hasn't happened to me. My doctor hasn't, but I have heard a number of people say that lately. So,
but I agree. Just tell them no. You're none of your business.
Mike on Facebook asked, could they really declare a gun illegal and take it away after you've owned it legally for years? Are you out the money, or does the state have to buy back? Wouldn't that constitute an illegal taking?
Well, it could be a violation of the due process clause where they're taking your property without compensation. But some bills have been passed where you have to surrender them and there's no provision for reimbursement. And the only way to challenge it is to go to the courts, and that's going to take you a couple of years.
And cost more than the firearm did.
Well, I'm a retired prosecutor, and in Cook County it was the standard policy that they would not return firearms, and the judges would say you'd have to file a writ of replevin. And it might cost you a couple $1,000 to get a lawyer to file a simple writ of replevin. Most defendants wouldn't do that for a $500 gun.
So basically, they're using your tax dollars against you.
Yes.
Which is not unusual.
In Cook County,
par for the course.
In the past, it's not unusual.
I find it interesting that this particular administration has refused to, for instance, abide by the Defense of Marriage Act or enforce immigration laws or any of a number of things, Fast and Furious and all of that. And it gives me pause. Why should I, as an American citizen, abide by violation of the Second Amendment when our own executive branch is blatantly spitting in the face of the Constitution?
Because they have the power, and if you don't, you have to deal with it.
And that pretty much sums that up, doesn't it?
Game over.
They're hypocrites.
Yeah, he who holds the gold has the control.
That's the golden rule.
Yeah.
Real quick, back when I was, just before I got my law license, I was with the Attorney General's office, and I remember looking across at City Hall, kitty corner from the 180 building where the appellate courts are now. And I made a comment to my boss. I says, gee whiz, we don't have to go very far. You could just throw a rock. You could throw a rock and probably get all the indictments you want over at City Hall, just as they come out the door. And he said, yes, but someday they'll have the power. And I remember that. It always stuck with me. It's like there's this constant fear. So anyone who wants to do something properly or to hold somebody to account has to deal with this prospect that someday you're going to be out of power, and then you're going to have your foe using it against you.
Isn't that the whole concept behind stare decisis? I mean, it's sort of like a détente. You don't cancel what the last Supreme Court said, and we won't cancel when you say it.
Right, but it's a doctrine. It's not hard and fixed,
right.
And it's not law. It's not law. It's a doctrine that's to be respected supposedly by honorable, ethical people who want to have consistency in the legal system.
Conservative judges follow stare decisis a lot more often than the liberal judges who want to reinterpret the Constitution, not the way it was originally intended, but the way they think it should be. And that's why you get these weird decisions where they're inserting words in the Constitution that don't appear there.
And I hear that from someone close to me about how it's a living document. The Constitution is a living document, and we interpret it according to the way things are in society today. And now they're even voting. They're going by public opinion on what should be the Constitution. I mean, it's getting really out of control.
Well, the intellectually better way of looking at it, if you want to amend the Constitution, you don't do it by describing it as a living document. Take an amendment and submit it to the 34 states, 3/4 of the states, and get it passed that way. It's intellectually dishonest to bypass that procedure and go out and reinterpret the Constitution to fit your social policies.
And that is very commonly happening.
With the liberal judges, yes.
Yeah.
That swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States.
The way they think it should be.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Living document. We're going to be back. We're going to be wrapping up here. We've got a couple of announcements we want to talk about coming up. And we've been talking about gun control and civil disobedience on Target Radio. You're listening to AM 560, The Answer. We'll be back after these messages.
For over 100 100 years, the Illinois State Rifle Association has supported the rights and freedoms of Illinois citizens to keep and bear arms. For over 100 years, the ISRA has supported the use of firearms as a sport for personal protection and as a fundamental aspect of national defense. For over 100 years, the Illinois State Rifle Association has been supporting you. Don't you think it's time you supported them? ISRA.org or 815-635-3198. The Illinois State Rifle Association, supporting you.
For 35 years, Pelcher's Shooters Supply has served the Lansing area. Pelcher's offers new and used firearms sales, appraisals, and gunsmithing service. Pelcher's new spacious showroom has hundreds of major brand firearms and supplies, and PelcherGuns.com features daily specials. Pelcher's Shooter Supply on the corner of Ridge Road and Henry Street in downtown Lansing. Online at PelcherGuns.com or call 708-474-0662.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560. The Answer with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
And we're back with more on Target Radio. We're wrapping it up. We'd like to thank our guests, Ed Ronkowski and Walter Maksym, and certainly Richard Pearson for calling in.
Yes, sir.
Always getting the update from Richard. We've got two things that we want to talk about. The first one is we are offering home protection and concealed carry in Waterman at the Aurora Sportsman's Club on March 23rd. Now, this is a little bit of an unusual one in that we're doing the seminar as we always do it. Tim and I always do it. It's an 8-hour seminar, and it's good out of the box for both Utah and Arizona non-resident concealed carry permits.
Yes, it is.
And that's what we do the second Saturday of every month. But the twist at Aurora Sportsman's Club on March 23rd is it will also be good for the Florida non-resident concealed carry permit and Chicago permit, because we will have the opportunity to take you out to the range and do the shooting also. No extra charge. It's $125 normally for the seminar with a $25 discount if you're an ISRA member, and we're not increasing the charge, and you will be able to get Florida shooting done. Won't cost you anything extra. So, and we also bring in Robin and Ron Zeeland come in, and they will take your fingerprints and they will take your photos for $15. So you can literally walk out of this seminar with Arizona, Utah, Florida, and if you live in the city of Chicago, the Chicago permit too.
Yes, you can.
For if you're an ISRA member for $100, that's pretty hard to beat.
Pretty hard to beat.
All we ask is you bring a pen that writes in black ink and a bag lunch.
Right.
Which Tim and I eat. No,
Yeah.
that's not. That's not true.
10% goes to your instructor.
10%. That's right. And it goes right to my waist. Exactly. We also have one other thing, and that is, after much thinking, we are going to have the 15th annual Clyde Howell NRA Youth Shooting Sports Camp coming up, and that will be May 31st, June 1, June 2. And we are in need of a registrar, and we'd love to get some donations. This is for kids ages 10 to 16. So it's a long tradition that we've been doing this camp. We're going to do it again. They come in on Friday after school, and they camp on location. This is going to be at the Illinois State Rifle Association range. This event is run in cooperation between Safer USA and the ISRA. And the kids get to shoot .22 pistol, rifle, shotgun, archery, AR-15s, all kinds of stuff. You got to say something there, Tim.
Well, it's going to be it's always a great event. All the kids like it. The parents that come as chaperones, it works really well. Everybody has a good time, and the ISRA really does a lot to help us out with that. So it's a great event, and we're getting that going, and hopefully you'll want to participate.
And we are looking for someone to help us out. We need some help in terms of adult volunteers. Particularly, we need a registrar, someone who might be willing and donating their time to do that. But it's a great time because ammunition's pretty scarce. We're hoping people will donate some ammo.
You want to give them the safer number in case they'd like to volunteer to be a registrar?
We could do that. It is 815-744-5487. Give me a call. Again, thanks to our guests, Ed Ronkowski, Walter Maksym, and Richard Pearson. I'd like to thank Robin Zeeland, our call screener, Lauren Fuller, the Emperor. Are you waving? Just talk.
Just want to remind anybody that's in Will County, Tuesday morning at 8:30 in the Will County office building, they're going to have the second hearing for the recommendation of concealed carry in Will County. 8:30 Tuesday morning in the Will County office building.
And that's at 302 North Chicago Street.
I thought you had to go to the restroom. You were jumping up and down. Why don't you just tell me what you wanted to say? It's okay. You hold up your hand. I tell you to go to the John.
I was doing the little spinny
Can I pick up here before we run out of time?
Yeah,
Thank
you should probably do that.
It's time for you to say goodbye. Say goodbye.
Bye.
That's it. You're done. Okay. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Pelcher Shooter Supply, Illinois State Rifle Association, 31 Moons, and Safer USA. Next week, what's going on with the gun stores? Until then, friend our Facebook page On Target Radio. Thanks for listening. We hope you'll be back next Sunday at 9 p.m. for more On Target Radio. And thanks, Mike, for making it all possible.
Thanks, Mike.